Okay, welcome everybody. This is the first video for Applied Math. I noticed that during my introduction videos, I did not actually introduce myself. I am David Ely, for those that have not had me before. Also, too, I told you if you had any questions, you could email me at deely@mogoodwillexcel.org is my email address. If you're under your school email, as soon as you start typing that in, it should come up. Applied Math is this class here. A lot of students, this is the one class a lot of students ask me, well, what are we actually learning in Applied Math? This is going to cover a wide range of different topics, but basically we try to take all the math that you do in Math Lab, pre-algebra, just a few extra things that basically apply to everyday things that you encounter. Now, that doesn't mean some of the math that you will use every day. Some of it will be things that you could do on a daily basis, whether you're shopping or buying things. But as far as, some of the fields that we do, maybe in specific areas like I think of the construction things like the area and volume things that we'll cover. Basically, those may be things you're not use every day, but if you were going to build something or put something together, you can use those math formulas and be able to use them. So it's a good practical class for using math in everyday situations. The first thing, kind of the first field that we cover is more the financial things. So that will be beneficial in everyday, shopping, buying, taxes, all those different things. So hopefully this will be a good class for you to take math and use it in everyday situations. Basically, too, this is the first video, like I was talking about in the introduction video, that I will go through a topic. You'll want to take notes. And then at the end of that, I'll have some practice problems that I'm going to have you do for the daily assignment. So make sure if you are taking notes, pause the video, get some note paper, and go through that. I put practice problems as we go along, so you'll leave spaces. I'll try to inform you, hey, leave a little space. We'll put some problems in here that you can use to look back over when you study your notes and look through them. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to cover in this class with the financial is values and how they're expressed. Okay, so basically, I've got up here, everybody loves this word. As soon as they see it, they're just like, oh, I love fractions. I always tell my students that have had me before, fractions don't have to be like clowns. They don't have to truly be scary. We can break them down and kind of talk them out, especially in this format, because, excuse me, we can go through and look and say, well, why do we use fractions? Why are we expressing things in fractions? We also have decimals and percents, and this is going to be where we're kind of moving into those that hate fractions are like, yay. But basically, we're going to be moving into this area for what we're doing, okay? Most of the things that we see are expressed like this with money and financial things. But basically, anything that we have, we can do values, and we express them in different ways. It's that thing where sometimes if you're baking or making recipes or something like that, you're not going to walk around and say, well, I need 0.50 cups of something. You usually say, I need a half cup of flour. So even though we don't mainly use fractions a lot, maybe on paper, or we like them, we do use them. And so this is something that we're going to compare these three things. Decimals, a lot of times when we deal with money, that's how we express things. We don't say I have 2/3 of a dollar when you pay for something. You usually say I have this much change, and we express that as a decimal. Percents, now that's something that you see when you shop. A lot of times you'll go in, hey, 30% off, 35% off. Or even when you pay, you'll see at the end when you get your receipt, they'll say the tax was 8.2%. So we're gonna look at these three things and compare them and see kind of how they all relate to each other. They're not all different, meaning they don't mean different values. They all have a value that's the same between them. It's just that how you express them is different. So this right here, I put the first one up here that we are probably the most familiar with. In fact, a lot of times when we use this as a fraction, we don't even think of it as a fraction. When someone says they have half or something or take half off, they don't even relate that to a fraction. But it is a fraction, 1/2, which any fraction, I always tell my students, any fraction this is a division symbol. So it's like reading it left to right, 1 divided by 2. If you were to put it into a calculator, 1 divided by 2, it's going to come out as 0.5. calculators don't usually put that 0 at the end, but it'll come out as this same decimal. So basically, this just means 1 divided by 2. That's how we express this as a fraction. People use fractions on math problems on paper so that you don't have long lists of division problems. You can quickly write something divided by something else by making it a fraction, okay? So this right here, we see 1 divided by 2, that is a value. If I took a candy bar, 1 candy bar, and I broke that in 2 and divided it into 2 pieces, that 1/2 of the candy bar, so if I took the candy bar and broke it in 2 equal parts, the 1/2 I have is the value. It's 1/2 of a candy bar. The other half would be over here, and I'd have 1/2 of a candy bar over here. If I put them back together, I'd have a whole candy bar. I'd have 1 candy bar. So this is taking one thing. You can do it with money. If I have $1 and I break that in 2, now it's not a physical thing anymore that we are breaking and eating. And now that I'm talking about candy bars, I am hungry. On this self-isolation, anytime I see food, I'm like, oh, that looks really good. But anyway, if I have half a dollar and I break that in half, we know we do it with money. We know we do it with change. So if I take that half and divide it by 2, I have 50 cents and 50 cents. Okay, so I break that in 2, I have 50 cents and 50 cents. If I have the half of a dollar over here, I have 50 cents. If I have the half dollar over here, I have 50 cents. I put them together, I have a dollar again. So this is $1 divided by 2 leaves me with 50 cents. Well, how do we write that? As a decimal, we write it like this, 50 cents. So this value and this value are the exact same thing. If I'm talking about money and I say half a dollar, I mean the exact same thing if I say 50 cents, okay? So this and this are the same value, okay? The next thing that we look at is percents. So I've wrote that as 50%. Well, we kind of know if we walk into a store and something says 50% off, we know that means half off. You get to take if it's a $24 item, then it's $12. If it's a $50 item, then it's $25. You take half off. So when we say that, half off, we're like, oh yeah, I know what that means. Well, that's this value. So 50% of something is half of it. Okay, so these values are all the same thing. Now we just need to know, how do we use that? Because we know, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. I know that. I figured that out. Like when you go into a store, I'm sure everybody's kind of figure out, well, if it's 50% off, I just divide it by 2. But when we do it on a piece of paper, that's when we start to go, well, wait a minute, what am I doing? And also when they get harder, meaning it's not 50% anymore, it's maybe 32.3%. Excuse me, or something like, 2/3. What is that as a decimal, as a percent? So they get harder, but the practice stays the same, and that's what we're going to do, is use this and put it into actual paper practice. So if I've got this once again and this, I knew, okay, if I had 50% off of something, I know I divide it by 2. Going back to the $50 item, I divide it by 2 and it's $25. Well, that's what you're doing here. If the whole item costs $50, you divide it by 2 and you get $25, okay? So let's look at a couple of those things. The first thing I want to look at is how to change a decimal to a percent. Okay, how to change a decimal to a percent. So if I've got any decimal, and I'm going to leave this one up here for a second, and I change it to a percent, how did I do that? What did I do on paper to make this a percent? So that we kind of know, well, what is the way to make anything change into different values expressed. So what I did to go from here to here, if you notice, this one has a decimal, this one does not. I actually moved the decimal 2 times to the right. So it was here, and I moved it once to there, which made it 5.0, and then I moved it again and put it at the end, so I moved it twice, and now the decimal's here at the end. You say, well, I don't see a decimal on the end of that one. Well, any whole number, like 8 or 15 or 320. There is a decimal there, we just don't see it. Okay, the decimal goes right here at the end. Okay, $8 is written as $8. $15 is written as $15. Okay, $320 written as $320. So there is a decimal always there. So that's we got to remember that there is a decimal on this one. It's just at the end, so we don't have to put it there. So 50 cents, to make that a percentage, I move the decimal 2 times to the right. So let's do that again. Already, I can tell I'm still going to misplace my eraser everywhere. Let's look at a couple other ones besides 50 cents. Okay, so I've got 0.45, 0.02. Let's put 0.004. And let's put 2.56. Okay, so these are all ones that have decimals, and we need to put them in percent form. Okay, so if I've got these and I need to put them in percents, remember when we took 50 and moved it to 50%, we moved the decimal 2 times to the right. So let's do that, the same thing here. Move the decimals 2 times to the right. Moving it 2 times to the right, okay, 1, 2. Moving it once, moving it twice, we get 45%. Okay, so 0.45 becomes 45%. What about 0.02? Well, move the decimal twice, 1, 2, we get 2%. Okay. Let's move this one. Now this one's got several zeros, as you can see, and I know a lot of times students see this and they either think 4% or, you know, just they get stuck. You know, it's like it's a new thing. It looks a little bit different. You know, if you leave a decimal in there, is it still a percent then? Well, let's look. Let's move the decimal 2 times to the right. 1, 2. We get 0.4%. You say, is that possible? It is. You can have decimals inside of a percent. So this is actually not even a full percent. It's 0.4%. Taxes never come out even, meaning when you go sales tax, it's never like 8% even. It's always like 8.2%, okay, or 7.3%. That's got a decimal and a percentage in it. So this is 7.3%, okay? So this right here comes out, you still just move the decimal twice. It never changes. Always move it twice to make a decimal a percent. So 1, 2, it's 0.4%. Same thing with this one. Okay, this one you go, well, there's a decimal already in it. Well, we need to make this a percent. So we are still going to move the decimal 2 times to the right. So 2 times to the right makes this 256%. You say, is that possible? Is it possible to have that big of a percent? It is. If you think about growth, you know, a lot of these I was talking about 50% off of something, but that also works with growth. Like my company grew by 100%. That means that not only was I, like, let's say my company was selling canoes. I don't know why I thought of that, but if I was selling canoes and I sold 50 canoes one day, then 100% would be if I sold 50 again. Well, let's say the next day I sold 100. Well, I grew by 100%. Instead of selling 50, I sold 50 and 50. So that's growth. That's, you know, you can actually grow. And you can grow above 100%. It's misused sometimes. I know some athletes, they hear their coach, I want you to give 120% or 110%. It's not physical possible to give more than your body. Okay, so the most you could give is 100%. But if you're talking about growth, then you could say you go above 100%. So this is 256%. It's more than 100%. So that's, but basically, as far as right now, what we're focusing on is just moving the decimal 2 times to the right. If it's a decimal and you need to move it to a percent, you move the decimal 2 times to the right. The flip side of that is to make a percentage a decimal. So put a little line in your notes, kind of separate this. This is a new kind of switch here. So these problems will be different. These are turning a percent into decimal. The ones we just did were turning a decimal into percent. This is going the other way, changing a percent to a decimal. So let's say I've got 4%. Let's go back to 50%, 17%. I put some practice ones that I think cover everything. 5%. Let's do 4%. 16.4%. And 142%. Okay, so here's percentages that need to be turned into decimals. So this is opposite. Now the decimal's here at the end. Remember I said they're always here at the end. This one's in it, but if it's not shown, then it's here at the end, okay? They're at the end of the whole numbers. And so now I need to make these a decimal. And this is going to be really important when we go to actually find percentages of something. We need to know how to turn these into a decimal. So instead of moving the decimal 2 times to the right to make it a percentage, we're going to start here and move it 2 times to the left. Okay, so it's here at the end. It's going to go 1, 2. So 50% becomes that 50 cents. Remember, 50 starts here, 1, 2, it's 50 cents. 50% of $1 is 50 cents. Okay, so that means here, same thing, move it 2 to the left. We got set 0.17. Here, you're going to move it 2 to the left, and you say, wait, I moved it once and there's nothing else. Well, you're going to move it again and fill in that gap with a 0. So 5% is 0.05. If you're thinking of money, 5% is 5 cents. 5% of $1 is 5 cents. So, you have a nickel. So that's how you move that 2 times. Same thing here. Let's try this one. I'll give you a second if you want to try it. You're at 4%. Just like this one at 5%. You're going to move it twice. And you got 0.04. This one, the decimal's already there, 16.4, but you don't change your rule. You move it 2 to the left, and it's 0.164. Okay? 16.4% as a decimal, move it twice, is 0.164. Okay, 142%. Once again, it's here at the end. You move it twice, you got 1.42. Okay? So that's how you express percents into decimals. This is going to be mainly where we do our math, because a lot of times in everyday life, you need to find the percent of something. Okay, you're not usually forced to find what 30 cents is of $1. You're not usually forced to find what that is as a percent. But a lot of times you are forced to go in and you have a price of something and you need to take a percent of something. Or you got to pay a tax or a tip. We could get into a whole lesson about tipping, but and we will work some problems later that we're tipping off of something. And I'm not going to try to say, well, you have to tip this at a restaurant. I mean, that's up to you. Right now, everything's to go anyways. So, but basically, when you go to tip, you want to leave, I think a lot of times people say, well, the base is 15%. Some people are like, hey, no, I like to do 20%. I'm not going to try to endorse what the right amount of tipping is, but I will show you how to find whatever percentage you want to leave. Okay, so we'll do that as well. That's what you have to do with this. Okay, so turning a percent into a decimal becomes what we have to do when we're trying to find the percent of something. Now, I use that word percent of something. So percent of, and I'm going to highlight this word of something. Okay, and that could be anything. Percentage off a price, percentage of a total, so that you can do tax, percentage of a tip. So that is percent of something. When I use that word of, in math world, we relate that to multiply. Okay, if I say I have 30 of something, 30 of, still thinking of food, 30 of cookies, you know, I have 30 of them. Well, we take that one cookie and we multiply it by 30, and that's where we get 30 cookies. If I say, let's say, and you say, well, I don't do this multiplication. Well, let's say you have a bag, that bag has 3 pieces of candy. Okay, and the one bag has 3 pieces of candy. Man, I really am hungry now. So if I have this bag of 3 pieces of candy, and I have 40 of them, okay, I have 40 of the bags, well then how many pieces of candy do I have? 40 of them. Well, then I got to do 40 times 3 to find out how many pieces of candy I have. And so I have 120 pieces of candy. So when we use that word of, we relate it to multiplication. You know, that's just kind of what it means. So we are going to be using multiplication to do this percent of something. So let's go back to our original problem, 50% of something. 50% of a dollar. Okay, and so we're going, okay, I have 50% of a dollar, and I need to find out how much money that is. Now we know we can make this, you know, move it twice and 50 cents, and we've done that, but it's not always going to be a dollar. It could be find 50% of $3 or something. So I need to know how do I multiply this? How do I do this to figure out what my total is? Well, what you have to do is you have to make this a decimal. Remember to make it a decimal. We're going to move it 2 to the left, and we're going to multiply that times a dollar. Okay? So 50% of 1 becomes 0.50 times 1. And anything times 1 is itself. So 50% of a dollar is 50 cents. But what if I'm doing, like I said, 50% of $3? Okay, 50% of $3. Okay, well now I can't just do the 50.50 and say it's 50 cents. I've got to take $3 and multiply it by 50.50. So you say, well, okay, this is where we use what we learned in Math Lab to do this problem. I'm going to actually make it like this, $3 times 0.50, so I can kind of see it. But then at that same time, I can pick an easier way to multiply this. But basically, just so you see, I'm taking $3 times 0.50. Okay, that's what we're doing. So let's switch that around. Remember, multiplication, it doesn't matter what order you do them in. 0.50 times 3. Okay, I just switched places, and I took off what I don't need that. So I'm going to do 0. 3 times 5 is 15. Okay, and remember, however many times you move the decimals in the problem, you got to move here. So it's $1.50. 50%, half of $3 is $1.50. Okay, let's do a couple more, and then I'll show you the quick way as far as just always kind of set it up multiplication wise. And you can use, you know, the thing is on this part when we're doing applied math, you can use your calculator, but you're going to want to practice some on paper so that you kind of get an idea of what you're doing with your multiplication. But let's say you're finding 45% of, let's still keep it even, let's do $12, okay? 45% of $12. Well, best thing to do for me is I'm going to take that 12 and I'm going to multiply it, remember multiply, and I'm going to do 0.45. Remember, move the decimal twice, 0.45. When I go to multiply this, 10, 5 times 2 is 10, carry the 1, 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. And then start my next row, remember put a 0. 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 1 is 4. Add them together. Somehow I'm leaning a little bit. Move the decimal twice, and 45% of $12 is $5.40. It's not quite half. Half would be 50%, which would be $6. It's a little bit less than half. It's 45%. Okay, so that's what you're going to be practicing. You may have to, especially when you get into this part of something, you're going to have to go back and watch maybe a little bit. And when you get into doing percent of something, you may have to come back and watch this a little bit. But I'm going to put a few more up here for practice that you can have in your notes and that you can watch. And I'm not going to comment much, I'm just going to do them. So I'm going to find 28% of $7. Let's do 3% of $100. And let's do 150% of $10. Okay, so 28% of $7, I'm going to do 0.28 times 7. And like I said, you can switch places. I always try to put the less amount on the bottom, but then you go 56, 14, plus 5 is 19. And then move the decimal twice. So 28% of the $7 is $1.96. 3% of $100, I'm going to take 100, and I'm going to multiply it times 0.03. Okay, because I moved the decimal twice, it's 0.03. 003. I moved the decimal $3. $3 is 3% of 100. 150% of $10. Okay, so let's do $10 times 150%. Move the decimal twice. It's 1.5. Okay, 0.5, 0.1, and move the decimal once. It's $15. Now I want to point out here that you say, well, $15 is more than $10. Well, remember, we're getting more than 100%. So 150% is more than the actual amount you were finding. So it actually came out to more. Okay? So if you want to even break it down even more to understand it, 100% of $10 is $10. 50 more percent, what's 50% of $10? 5. Half of $10 is 5. So 100% was 10, 50% was 5. So 150% is that 10 plus 5, which is $15. Okay? All right, so I know that was quite a bit there at the end, especially finding percent of something, but you can come back, watch this. This is what I'm talking about too. If you need to email me and be like, hey, there was one thing that I didn't quite get, you know, make sure you're reaching out and doing that, and we can go through that. Let me put some practice problems that I'm going to have you actually do. This is where I want you to do these problems. Show me a picture of your notes and your answers, and that way I know that you did this daily assignment for today. Okay, the first daily assignment. So let me put up some problems, and I'm going to switch boards here actually, so it's a little bit clearer. Okay. So we've got, I want you to turn these decimals to percents. So this goes back to the first thing. Okay. So turn these into percents, which means you move the decimal 2 times to the right. So 0.75, 0.30, 0.02, 0.005, and 3.26. So I want you to put these as percents, okay? Then I want you to put these percents as decimals. So going the other way, okay? So you're going to turn these percents into decimals. 35%, 17%, 16.2%, 0.03%, and 142%. Remember, this is moving the decimals 2 times to the left, okay? 2 times to the left, okay? Then the percent of a value. So you're going to find the percent of a value, the last thing that we did there, okay? You're going to find 18% of $10. Okay, 18% of $10. 12% of $100. Okay, 3% of $1. We did that one. Oh, actually, we did it of $100, so now you're going to do it as $1. And 125% of $15. Okay, that was a challenging one. Try that one. I can put it as 15.00 or $15, however you want to do that. But I want you to do these problems. There's about 15 of them. Just do them on paper. Oh. Sorry, I think the video fell. You got a good picture of my ceiling. I don't want to reshoot the whole thing. So here's decimals to percents, percents to decimals, and the percent of value. So find those there. I'll leave that for a second so you can copy them if you were copying. I apologize. I think it was probably when I knelt down, created a little mini earthquake. So there you go. And like I said, when you finish, just take a picture of your work and your notes and upload it to the Google Classroom on the classwork under that first assignment, and that'll be your turn in for your first assignment. All right, thanks guys.